Man, that was probably one of the uglier wins we've seen from the Bulls this season. As I've always said before, hey, a win is a win, doesn't really matter how you get it. But that was kind of a game that doesn't really inspire a lot of confidence in this team that they've really turned things around, at least from what we saw earlier in the year. I mean, this is the Charlotte Hornets we're talking about here. And a Hornets team that is decimated right now by injuries, most notably to some of their best players in LaMelo Ball, Gordon Hayward, and PJ Washington. But not only that, unlike in the last game against the Hornets, in which the Bulls struggled for most of that game to really put those guys away until the fourth quarter, the Bulls were without Patrick Williams and Alex Caruso in that game, two key rotational players, and LaVine and Vucevic being on minutes restrictions. Tonight, Patrick Williams and Alex Caruso were back in the lineup and starting for the Bulls, and yet somehow the Bulls actually looked worse than they did the other night at the United Center against the same team. And look, I don't want to sit here and just rip into the Bulls and complain about how they showed up tonight against one of the worst teams in the league, because they still got the win. They took care of business in overtime and closed it out. They moved into sole position of 9th in the standings in the East. But yeah, this game shouldn't have been this close throughout, and it shouldn't have gone into overtime. Here's the problem. The guys really couldn't get much of a flow on offense. Like, really, they started off the game well. They went up 14-2. They generated good looks to start, moving the ball well, and right out of the gate, I was like, okay, this is going to be a game that goes into garbage time early. Give the guys some rest, let some of the young bench players get some run in. But from that point on, the Bulls never led by more than 12 points. That was the largest lead throughout the game. After that 14-2 start, the Bulls brought in Zach and Vooch. The offense just kind of went back to what we saw at the beginning of the season. These weird ISO post-up plays where the man posting up either takes a contested jumper or kicks it out to an open man, but that ends up being a dangerous pass. The Bulls had so many miscues on offense, careless turnovers, silly fouls, poor shot selection. They somehow let a G League Hornets team reject them at the rim multiple times in this one. And look, I hate to say this because I know it's very reactionary, but I'm just seeing the same stuff from Zach LaVine that we saw before. One, not being that engaged, at least in the last game we saw some solid effort on the defensive end from Zach, not so much in this one. Two, it's almost like Zach is in his head. He's too passive when he should be aggressive, and when he is aggressive, he's been ineffective in finishing at the basket for a player who has been so efficient finishing at the rim throughout his career. Tonight, he didn't have a single field goal inside. Just 2 threes, was 2 for 9 from the floor, 2 for 6 from 3, 9 points, was a -5 on the night. And I don't know what it is, but when Zach is on the court, this team doesn't seem to function well. I'm not saying that's all Zach's fault, because that's on the coaching staff to figure out the right rotations to complement his skills. It's also on the front office for this roster they have constructed, and DeMar not being the best fit alongside Zach LaVine. But yeah, it's just the more that I see how this team moves and functions on offense, it's clear the Bulls would be best suited to move on from Zach LaVine. I know I'm not saying anything revolutionary here. We've been talking about the need to move on from Zach for a while now. Everyone knows that it's eventually going to be coming, whether it be at the deadline or in the offseason, but I guess I'm more saying this because right away in the first 2 games back since Zach has returned, I'm not really liking what I'm seeing. I'm seeing more of the 5-14 Bulls that we saw at the start of the year, even though both of these games ended in wins. To be fair though, the Bulls, even before these 2 most recent wins against the Hornets, they haven't looked especially great in their last 4 or 5 games or so. That includes the games where Zach wasn't there, but still, now seeing the guys, most of them back and healthy, and seeing this team still struggle on offense doesn't, again, inspire a lot of confidence in this group for fans. That said, the positives though, well, one was that the Bulls were able to take care of business in finishing this game out in overtime. Last game, they closed out in the fourth quarter. They messed around in the fourth in this one, but finished off a struggling team in overtime when they were gassed. They needed to do that. But Coby White, great game. He struggled in the first half a bit, was smoking some layups, which was odd, but he finished the game well. 27 points on efficient scoring, 10 for 19 from the floor, 3 for 7 from 3, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, and only 1 turnover. DeMar, also a solid game, even though those last few possessions with less than 2 minutes to go into regulation were pretty bad. Like, I get that he's the veteran of the team, he's one of the most clutch players in the game of basketball, but the ISO ball was a little too predictable. He had a bad turnover on the baseline when the Bulls needed a bucket and other guys were open, and that final shot was not executed well. Not a good look. I know Vooch was open. I know some people are going to be focused on that, but Vucevic was deep behind the arc. I don't know if that really would have been that much better of a look. But overall, a good game from DeMar, where he scored 18 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists. Did he really have another 3 steals? I feel like we keep seeing these high steal rates from DeMar. Dude has been hustling, fighting for steals recently. That's good to see. But in this game, it was really all about the Bulls big men that showed up very well tonight. tonight, which is to be expected when the Hornets don't really have as much of a presence inside. Nick Richards is a solid player, but he's not going to be a good match for Vucevic and Drummond. I was a little disappointed that Billy Donovan pulled Drummond for the final 5 minutes or so of the game. I mean, he was really solid in crashing the glass, giving the Bulls a lot of energy, working well in the pick and roll. Like, I get it, Vooch is the guy you're going to close with, but Drummond was feasting and was actually more efficient at finishing than Vooch was. Drummond put up 21 points, 15 rebounds, 9 for 12 from the floor, was 3 for 3 from the line, and also was a plus 16 in this game, while Vucevic finished the game a minus 9. Don't get me wrong, Vooch was still efficient. He was 10 for 18 from the floor. He was actually better in getting those hook shots to fall. He also had 10 rebounds and 4 assists and a steal in the block. Like, it was still a good game for Vucevic. I just would have stuck with what was working in those final minutes, and everything was working with Andre Drummond. And after Vooch was brought in, Hornets strung some possessions together that enabled them to send the game into overtime. I will say, the Hornets did shoot the ball insanely well from 3. That helped them stay in this game, particularly Rozier, who has the green light right now with all those guys being out. Hornets shot 17 for 42 from 3. It's actually astonishing the Bulls still won this game despite only hitting 9 threes compared to the Hornets' 17. But anyway, it's a win, guys. That's all we care about. Bulls sit 9th in the standings, pretty large gap between 8th and 9th, but we'll take one game at a time. Bulls are off tomorrow as they head back to Chicago to take on the Houston Rockets. That should be a fun game. Until then, guys, as always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.